Call on the Lord while he may be found. Call on him while he's near. Call on the Lord while he may be found. He'll wash away your fears. Call on the Lord while he may be found. Call on him while he's here. Call on the Lord while he may be found. He will wipe away your tears. And let's do it in a round with the girls and the guys. Father, I adore you. Lay my life before you.
Lay my life before you.
Jesus, I love you. Worship life before you.
I lay my life before you. How I love you. Spirit, I adore you. I lay my life before you. How I love you.
To keep your lovely face ever before my eyes. This is my prayer. Make it my strong desire, that in my secret heart no other love competes, no rival throne survives, and I serve only you. Jesus, oh Jesus, come and fill your lamps. Jesus, oh Jesus, come and fill your lamps. In my life, Lord, be glorified, be glorified. In my life, Lord, be glorified today. In your church, in your church, Lord, be glorified, be glorified. In your church, Lord, be glorified today. In our homes, in our homes, Lord, be glorified, be glorified. In our homes, Lord, be glorified today. And Lord, we just lift up our country as well. Be glorified in our country. And We do ask your grace upon the president and all his council and his wise men and all of those thousands of people that he's put in places, and hopefully he could trust them. And we thank you as you're digging up the deep, dark abyss that where Satan lives there in Washington, D.C., and the demons are screaming, and blind eyes are blinder than they've ever been. And we just ask, Lord, that it would be not just a organizational or economic revival, but it would be a true spiritual revival, where blind eyes would see, hard, dark hearts that believe the most evilest things, that they would just be brought to salvation. And here we are, Lord, at the Easter time of year. Stir our hearts, use us, make us witnesses, glorify yourself in us and through us. In Jesus' name, amen and amen. I don't know if you heard what Colorado passed, but not only if you don't call your child by the correct pronouns they want to be called by, not only will they take your kids away from you, but you will go to jail or pay a huge fine or both for not calling them the right pronouns. They just passed that yesterday. Insanity, true insanity, as if that's a normal, even a heroic thing for a guy to call himself a girl, as if that's even possible. But then if you don't go along with that delusion, we'll put you in jail. I won't even talk about the UK and Europe. They are gone, gone, gone. Just saw today, though, that in our country, there's 250 elected Muslims that are holding some kind of, and their goal, I think by the end of next year, is to have 1,000. And this is what they've done in Europe, and especially in the UK. So there's just an interesting thing, but I really find it interesting prophetically how how the UK has said, we just need to forget the NATO, we need to forget America, and we need to have our own army. We need to get together. You know, Trump was saying that for like 5 years. If Europe got together, they would be the biggest economy in the world. Bigger than us, bigger than China, but they don't get together. Iron mixed with clay, if you remember Daniel. And they're like, yeah, let's get together and let's forget the NATO. Let's have our own European army. And I'm like, oh, check. And then they said we should have a currency that is all electronic, no paper anymore. And they've already done that. If you go to England, and they had a thing where a guy was secretly recording it. He was trying to get 2,500 pounds in Australia out of his bank. And he had 11,000 pounds in there. They wouldn't give it to him. He went to the manager and finally to the headquarters, and they said, unless you can prove to us what you're going to use that money for, you can't take it out. He goes, we agree it's my money? Yes. I'm going to buy a motorcycle. Prove it. You're going to buy a motorcycle. Prove it. But go buy it and then come back and show it, and we'll give you the money for it. I mean, and I know in UK it was like that. When we were there visiting, you couldn't find an ATM. Where you did find them on occasion in a very dark, sketchy place, they did not want you to have cash. Yeah, there's a couple of European, but no, the only time you can use cash is out and about. You know, the different stands and stuff. But yeah, you're right. If you want to. Yes, that's right. I know. It's not my home, but I love it. UK is just a very beautiful, magical place. What's that?
Yesterday, there's like at least 10 cities in England that have Muslim mayors.
Yeah, I know. And they are out and out making Shia laws. And I don't know if you saw it they're getting ready to put in they're going to put in a Universal Studio in Beckenshire somewhere. I don't know what the name started to be. Berkshire. And the mayor of that region came out and said they will take no applicants whatsoever from white people. And it's completely illegal now.
You know, Pastor, I think I shared with you, my father was a prophet.
Yes.
When I was walking with him, going to the park, I must have been 14, have
Yeah.
a choice, either America or Great Britain. And we were walking in that, and when that call to prayer, in the Jewish community, the call to prayer, I'm telling you, it was demonic.
What year was this?
Not too long ago, I was with my sisters and my cousin. When was that? Yeah, it wasn't long ago.
Yeah, I know.
I thought, no, I was about 14 when they built their first mosque.
Yeah, okay.
But as far as the mosques being in the Jewish quarter,
Yeah. Crazy, I know. Well, the governor of Pennsylvania approved $5 million to build a mosque in Pennsylvania. It's like, man, I built like 3 church buildings. I would have loved any amount of money, government to help us. That would have been great. But well, we come tonight to chapter 10 of Numbers. And we're going to look at a few different things, but the 2 main things there, the 2 silver trumpets and giving job to Moses' brother-in-law, Hobab. And so we come to chapter 10. We just finished chapter 9, giving some pointers on the Passover and so forth, as you know. And then we come now to chapter 10, and this is all backtracking. Probably before Exodus 40, before the complete building of the tabernacle and so forth, and putting it up, and somewhere in this time. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, make 2 silver trumpets for yourself. You shall make them of hammered work, like the menorah, like the candlestick. Remember, they had that of all hammered out into one piece. And you shall use them for calling the congregation and for directing the movements of the camp. Now, it appears here that these were built, and we're going to discover it's only the Levites that use them, but they weren't a part of the holy utensils of the tabernacle in the same way. So it's sort of interesting that we didn't know about this back in Exodus for some reason. It doesn't come up till now. And as we see, it's to call the congregation and then eventually to lead the congregation of movement, which they did. And so these things have been made, and they've been there all through Leviticus and all. And it even is mentioned in Leviticus that they were used. But now we see the actual construction and building of these 2 silver trumpets. And you know, I think you got to be really careful, saying, oh, blue means this and red means this. But I do think it's very clear as you study through Scripture that bronze is the metal of judgment, and silver is the metal of, and I just had a complete brink, of judgment as well, I believe. But, and there's 2 of them. 2 is a really important number. There was 2 spies that went in for Joshua. Jesus sent out his disciples in 2. And so there's some areas there. But we come back and you say, well, hold it. They were blowing not the trumpet, but the shofar, weren't they? And Cheryl, do you have my pointer, honey? I know you brought it. And so... may need this here. And it's on the wrong one. Give me a sec. Intermission here. Sorry about that. Technical problems. There we go. So these here. Go to the next place here. Next slide, Josh. So this is clearly the shofar, the ram's horn. And we've covered that, we've talked about that. But now all of a sudden we have these 2 trumpets. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go through and point out where the shofar is versus the trumpets and when they were used. And let me tell you something. I've never gone down such a deep rabbit hole as this. because there are several different words used for the shofar and for the trumpets. And a lot of times they don't actually use that word. They'll just use a different Hebrew word like to sound. And it's up to you to figure out what they were blowing. Or it'll say, and they sounded the alert or whatever. And so it's not clear. So when I can understand, they blew the shofar and the silver trumpets pretty much at the same time for pretty much the same reasons. They were both being blown. Now, there were isolated times, but it seems that that changed as we get into Chronicles and then David. David talks about, hey, yeah, we blew this at that time and that time. But then David had a whole horn section and a giant choir that he put together. And so when he was talking about blowing of the horns, it was a whole band of horns. So it became something far greater than the simple blowing of a couple of trumpets in David's time and with some of the kings and the chronicles. And so what we do have, though, is these silver trumpets actually, as we keep going here, from what we gather, they look something like this, a beaten. I don't know how you make a solid horn hammered out in that way. But that's what they probably looked like, and this is why. Because of, keep going. There we go. Yeah. Because of go back to the arch. The arch. So this arch right here, which is in Rome. And in doing this, it was built to commemorate Titus's victory over Jerusalem. And go to the next picture. This is what it would look like up close, but it's also much vaguer than that if you were to go today. But you'll notice three distinct things. The menorah, the candle light, and then you'll notice the table of showbread, and then the two trumpets. And this is what was declared, that they were able to bring back these three things that were of great value. And again, the ark wasn't one of them at that time. But this is why we are pretty certain in what they look like in the description from that monument they built to the praise of Titus for conquering Jerusalem in 70 AD. So he says you'll use these things, and let's look at verse 3. When they blow both of them, all the congregation shall gather before you at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. If they blow only one, then the leaders, the heads of the divisions of Israel, shall gather together. When you sound the advance, the camps that lie on the east side, excuse me, I skipped one of the leaders come. Okay, when you sound the advance, the camps that lie on the east side shall begin their journey. Now we looked at that, how it went, how the east side went and the south side went, and they went in order when they traveled, right, from the tabernacle. Tabernacle would be out front, and then all the people would collapse together in their groups as they went through the desert to the promised land. And then he says, when you sound the advance of the second time. So you say, now hold on, what? There was one trumpet, two trumpets, now we have the sound with the second time. Is it one trumpet or two? This is the thing. It's muchly debated. But the camps that lie on the south side shall then begin their journey. They shall sound the call for them to begin their journey. When the assembly is to be gathered together, you shall blow, but not sound the advance. So it's a different sound. Then the sons of Aaron the priest shall blow the trumpets. These guys had a lot of different jobs, didn't they? Well, they also had to figure out how to blow these silver trumpets. I played the trumpet. It's not an easy instrument to blow and play. And these shall be to you as the ordinance forever throughout your generations. So this is something that is forever. Now it's interesting when the Lord says this. Now, when you go to war in your land against the enemy who opposes you, then you shall sound the alarm with the trumpets. So the call to battle, which happens at the end of Numbers. We actually see this happening with these trumpets. Also in the day of your gladness, okay? I'm not sure what that is, but in your appointed feast. And then he gets more specific. At the beginning of your months, shall blow the trumpets over your burnt offerings, which remember was every morning, and over the sacrifices of your peace offerings every evening. And they shall be a memorial for you before God, and I am the Lord your God. So we see these things being blown. It appears alongside the ram's horn, which have a very different sound. And it also appears that this is happening a lot. It's not like you hear it once a year or something. You're hearing this horns daily. It's almost like the alarm clock. You know, you have an idea of mornings here. And they started the first burnt offering. This is time to get up, get going. But then also they blew them at the first of the month. So you had a sense then. But then they blew them at the various festivals. And so you had a sense of what month it was. And so the trumpets really were, once you understood that the types of blowing and when they blew it and how long they blew it, how short they blew it, it would give you a very clear direction. I think Paul might allude to this in 1 Corinthians 14 when he said, if you come speaking in tongues and I don't have the interpretation, how's that going to make any sense to me? And then he actually said, it's like a trumpet being blown, but not giving a distinct sound with what that trumpet is to do. Are we retreating? Are we going forward? Are we stopping? Are we going? It's got to be a clear, distinct sound. And so he says marching, so the assembly of the congregation, the marching to move out, warfare, and then I love that little part in verse 9 where he says, remember, God's fighting for you, and he'll save you from your enemies. In Deuteronomy 3:22, you must not fear them, for the Lord your God himself fights for you. In Deuteronomy 20, verse 4, for the Lord your God is he who goes with you to fight for you against your enemies to save you. It's interesting that C.S. Lewis picks up on this in the Chronicles of Narnia. And remember, he gives the lion, Aslan, gives each of them a gift. And he gave Susan, what? A trumpet. And he said, if you're ever in trouble, wherever you're at, you blow that trumpet and I'll come to rescue you. And later on in the story, she did have to blow that trumpet, and Aslan came and brought victory in their battle. Now, Wenham, in his commentary, and let me tell you, the commentaries very much vary on this, but he said from what he can gather from Jewish tradition, a long blast would be used to assemble the people to Moses at the tent of meeting and for worship. And short staccato blasts were used for battle and to move out the camps. So when you're moving out the camp and when you're going to battle, it's the same staccato sound with the horn. I hope that helps you. So you see there's basically the four major areas. One to use to gather the people together, another one to direct the movements of the camp, another one for a sound of battle, and another one for the various festivals. And we saw the list of those in verse 10. The day of gladness, the appointed feasts, the beginning of your months, your burnt offerings, over the sacrifice of your peace offerings. And this shall be a memorial to you forever. I am the Lord. So you say trumpets, I wonder. But as we get that heavenly, futuristic vision, from the Apostle Paul talking about the last days and the rapture. And then in Revelation, we see trumpets happening all over the place. A matter of fact, we will actually hear a trumpet before we get raptured. Interesting, in 1 Thessalonians 4, verse 16 to 18, of course I got to read a whole lot more than this around 1 Thessalonians 4. But for the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout. That's interesting. The Lord himself is going to shout, yoo-hoo, coming for his bride. And then the voice of the archangel, sounds like his best men or something, are all in on it too, you know. And then the trump of God. Now, in Revelation, we'll find 6 trumpets, but we will discover that the angels are blowing them, not God. And then the dead in Christ will rise first. I've been told that's the Baptist. It is the Baptist, okay. And then he who are alive and remain shall be caught up, harpazo in the Greek, rapturus in the Latin, which we have sort of focused in on that Latin transliteration sound of it, the rapture, together with them in the clouds, to meet the Lord in the air. And thus we shall always be with the Lord. Therefore, comfort one another with these words. And so maybe in reading this before, you saw the rapture and getting caught up in heaven, but you sort of missed out on the day of gladness. It's interesting there in Numbers 10, because we haven't seen that phrase before, the day of gladness. What is he talking about? I think he's talking about this right here. This will be a statute forever. The day of gladness. There's the shout of our husband Jesus. There's the loud voice of the angels. And then there's the trumpet being blown. Also in 1 Corinthians 15, another passage talking about this kind of stuff, in verse 51 to 54, behold, I tell you a mystery. I love this, how Paul is saying, man, I got this right from the throne of God, and it's exciting, and I want you guys to know it. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed. That verse we should have in the nursery, right? We may not all sleep, but you're all going to get changed by the end of the sermon. In verse 52, in a moment, in a twinkling of an eye, at the last trump, for the trump will sound, and the dead will be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. So here it sounds like there's the first trumpet that's blown, and the dead rise, and then there's another trumpet blast, and some other trumpet blasts, and then finally at the last trump, we are gathered together with Christ. All these incorruptible become changed and are in the air in our new bodies with Christ. For this corruption, verse 53, must put on incorruption. This mortal must put on immortality. So when this corruptible has put on incorruption and this mortal has put on immortality, then shall be brought to pass the saying that is written, death is swallowed up in victory. And I would say that's sort of the sound of a trumpet, isn't it? It's joy, it's gladness, it's victory. And this is what we're going to hear. We're going to hear, I think, at the rapture, quite a few trumpets being blown. And I think in the tribulation period, when God's moving and doing stuff, trumpets are blown. And I think when we get to heaven, there's going to be a lot of trumpets being sounded. And so it's an interesting thought. You know, maybe we haven't thought of it. You know, we go back and we start reading through this. And in the Hebrew culture, there was a lot of dancing, a lot of stringed instruments, a lot of singing. And there were feasts set up where all the families got together several times a year. And literally, they could be killed if they work. Now, I just spent a week with my kids. And we took time off. But yet I noticed both of my boys that are sort of, connected to the web in their work, The kids were all there and we're all doing stuff, but they were both on their phones quite a bit. And I thought, man, I saw a meme where a guy walked into work where they were supposed to be hammering, building houses, and the boss grabbed his cell phone away and drove 2 nails into his cell phone and said, get to work. That's sort of what I felt like. But you couldn't work. You had to take these holidays, and trumpets were being sounded, and music was being played. I love the Hallel songs, When we go to Israel, there's a group called Israel's Hope, and I play them I give everybody the songs ahead of time, and then we play them in the bus as well as we're going up to Jerusalem. Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord. Those Psalm 118 to Psalm 124, they're all Hallel songs when the children of Israel would sing them as they're heading to Jerusalem. And they're just wonderful. So singing on the trip, on the way, singing as they head up to Jerusalem. And then once they get to Jerusalem, they're singing them together. It's so good to come to the house of the Lord. Better is one day in his courts than 1,000 elsewhere. I think heaven is going to be anything but a little baby floating on a cloud with a trumpet. Okay? And with angel wings, right? I think it's going to be a fun, celebrative place of gladness. And this is the picture we get. So they're moving out. So at this point in time, from Exodus through all Leviticus, which was a month, and now all the way to Numbers chapter 10, they've been in Mount Sinai. I forgot to bring the map. Paran, they're going to go to the desert of Paran. And I'll bring the map next week, I forgot. But it's not that far. They're like, oh, we're going to pack up and we're going to go. Hey, let's go to the promised land. And they go just a little ways and stop. And they stay there for quite a while in Paran, as we'll find out. There were some kinks that still had to be worked out in these people. And we will see it, especially in the next several chapters. Very dicey, good chapters, great chapters for us in the New Testament believers as well. Well, in verse 11 through 13, so now it came to pass on the 20th day of the 2nd month in the 2nd year that the cloud was taken up from above the tabernacle of testimony. The 20th day of the 2nd month. Now, do you remember back in chapter 9? They had a Passover problem. Remember this last week? The guy had somebody unclean die. And he said, I won't be counted clean in time for the 14th of the 1st month when they have Passover. And Moses went and sought the Lord. And what did he say? Wait till the 2nd month. But remember that Passover and then the 7 days of unleavened bread make 8 days. And now we see that sure enough, on that 2nd month, they were doing it. But on the 20th day, they had to move out when they were still either just finishing it or still had a day in it. I don't know. It makes it interesting to me how they counted, because my guess is they're counting by the 20th day, even though they started on the evening of the 4th day or the 14th day, that it counted 7 Sabbath or 7 days, 7 Sabbath days. Even though the way we would count it, we don't see 7 days in there, do we? We see 6. But again, when you get to the New Testament, you have this same kind of problem with the 1st day, the 3rd day he rose, and people have all these problems with, because you got to understand that you can be 1 second in the evening when the sun sets and you are in the day. It's over. So again, you don't have to spend 24 hours in that day to say they've accomplished that day. They could be in that day in the Hebrews way of thinking for 1 second. But anyway, I thought I would just throw it out there because I found that interesting. And in verse 12, and the children of Israel set out from the wilderness of Sinai on their journeys. Then the cloud settled down in the wilderness, here it is, of Paran, not too far from Sinai. And they started out for the first time according to the commandment by the Lord by the hand of Moses. Remember, we went through this back in chapter 3? Yeah, 3, where, where they were all in order and the armies were counted and the armies were put in order. And then all the tribes are put on which side of the tabernacle, and then which one would move out first, second, third. How does that look? Let's look at it, verse 14 to 28. The standard of the camp of the children of Judah set out first, according to their armies, over their army with Nahshon, the son of Abinadab. Okay, we'll come back to this. But next, verse 15, over the army of the tribe of the children of Issachar was Nathanael, the son of Zuar. Over the army of the tribe of the children of Zebulun was Eliab, the son of Hilon, and the tabernacle was taken down, and the sons of Gershon and the sons of Merari set out, carrying the tabernacle. Now, verse 18, the standard of the camp of Reuben set out according to their armies. Over their army was Izur, the son of Shedur. Over the army of the tribe of the children of Simon was, those other guys. And verse 20, over the army of the tribe of the children of Gad was some of his top relatives. And then the Kohathites now set out. Remember the 3 groups, carrying the holy things. The tabernacle would be prepared for their arrival. Now, verse 22, the standard of the camp of the children of Ephraim set out according to their armies. Over their army, it was some guys. And then in verse 23, over the army of the tribe of children of Manasseh was Gamaliel, the son of Pedahuzur. And then verse 24, over the army of the tribe of the children of Benjamin was Abidan, the son of Gideoni. And then the standard of the camp of the children of Dan. They were the last ones in the rear of the camps, but out according to their armies. Over their armies was Ahiezer, the son of Ammishaddai. And over the army of the tribes of the children of Asher was Pagel, the son of Ochar. And over the army of the tribe of the children of Naphtali was Ahira, and the son of Enan. So, again, forgive me for butchering those names, but again, remember on each side there was a head leader of other tribes. And so he names the main tribe on the east, the tribe on the west, tribe on the south, and they begin to move out in order. And then you have a section of the Merarites and the Gershonites to the priests that are carrying the boards, and the other ones carrying the material. And then you have some other ones, and then you got the Kohathites sort of in the middle being protected as they're carrying this on. And so this was their first practice lesson, if you would. But now we come to an interesting story in verse 29 to 32. Now Moses said to Hobab, the son of Reuel, the Midianite, Moses' father-in-law, we are setting out for the place of which the Lord said, I'll give it to you. Come with us, and we will treat you well. For the Lord has promised good things to Israel. And he said to him, I will not go, but I will depart to my own land and to my own relatives. So Moses said, please do not leave, inasmuch as you know how we are to camp in the wilderness, and you can be our eyes. And it shall be, if you go with us, indeed it shall be, that wherever good the Lord will do to us, the same we will do to you. Now this is a rather interesting story, because we have some interesting things that happen. First of all, we come to Moses' father-in-law being called Reuel. We're back in Exodus chapter 2, verse 18. We knew him, chapter 3, verse 1, as Jethro. However, in Exodus 2:18, it does mention him as Reuel, which isn't that strange. You know, Jacob was called Israel. Joshua, well, we find him in Numbers being called Hoshea as well. So it wasn't that unusual to be called different names, and the Bible doesn't always explain it going, hey, by the way, I'm using his Arabic name in this case, and I'm using the Hebrew name they called him in this case. And so that's just a fact. And so Hobab was his brother-in-law. However, I will say the term father-in-law is used in a lot of cases. It's used actually for sister-in-law. It's used for brother-in-law. It's used for just relative. It's translated in all those ways. So to say that Reuel is the father-in-law, no question. It seems to be a father-in-law, but it could be translated, he was a relative of a relative. But we do believe, because of Exodus 2 and Exodus 3, that Reuel indeed is Jethro that had been talked about earlier. And to this point, he's been with Moses along the way. Now, remember, we were a little surprised because Moses is heading towards Egypt with his wife and kids. Remember what happens, though? He hadn't circumcised his kids when he knew he should, and he almost died. And his wife cut the foreskin off her 2 kids and threw at him and said, "You're a man of bloodshed to me." And she actually departed, because then later Jethro brings her back and says, "Hey, this is your family. You need to have them." And we didn't know, but his other relatives were there. And again, it's very possible that they were a Bedouin community, as most of the communities at this time, and many are still to this day. All over Israel, there's Bedouin communities. Big, giant tents. They just pick up and they move, and you see them there one day, and the next day you look like they had never been there. And that's today, in modern day. It's funny because now they have these incredible tents right on the side of the road or out in the middle of nowhere, and next to their tents are brand new Mercedes, Benz, cars, and they're wealthy people, but they choose to live in tents. So it could be that Hobab just dropped in, as relatives often do. Mark Twain says that relatives should stay as long as a fish you catch until it begins to stink. And usually you catch a fish and within 3 days it starts to stink. That's how long relatives should stay. But anyway, it sounds like he was around longer, and Moses enjoyed his company. And so he's like, "Hey, you know what? I'm not really fitting in here. There's a lot going on, and you've got to be a Jew, and you got all these feasts going on, and you got these trumpets blasting, and the tabernacle, and you're sort of a key guy, and you're busy a lot, and I don't see where I fit in." And Moses begs him. Now, let's understand, this doesn't always work out positively. Remember, God told Abraham to go by himself, him and Sarah. But then he's like, brings his nephew Lot with him. Remember that? First he brings his dad with him, and they all start dying on the way. And then finally Lot ends up being a big mistake that he took him with him. But in this case, no. In this case, it is a real example to us to call people to come alongside. Was he a believer? Was he circumcised? No, not at this moment. But it is an amazing thing when I've seen, even at our church, where people will come in that are not believers, and they are just cared for and loved on and really accepted as if they are believers. And sometimes we think they are and then find out they're not. And when non-believers are treated by believers as believers, it's amazing how receptive they become. There's just sort of a value there. It's just go love the world as if they are believers. And not rock around like a Pharisee going, "Hold it, let me see. You say you're a Christian, but I got this little test for you. It's 20 questions. It'll just take 30 seconds for you to fill out. Decide whether I'm going to be nice to you or not." Sometimes Christians can be that way. But here, I think Moses gives a beautiful New Testament example of saying, "Come along. We could use your help." How? Well, you know the land here. And you go out. You travel quick. I've noticed that. And you could actually sort of be out past the tribes, in front of us, spotting out places. So when we get there, you have it all laid out where we can all, don't go there, the hill covers, and it's over here. It's a better area. And so we could use your experienced eye in this desert situation, because that's the kind of guy you are. You're experienced in this. Now, I'll just simply ask you, did God need Hobab? Obviously not. Was Moses lying? No, I think on a human level, I think he probably had some good ideas. We can set this up for the bathroom area over there and set this up over here for the changing room I don't know. But either way, Moses put the screws in to say, come with us, be a part of us. And whatever God does with us and blessing us, if you come along with us now, those blessings will be on you as well. Isn't that true? It's amazing when I've met Christians who have said to me, I found out after 5 years of my neighbor living next door to me that he was a Christian and went to church. At any point, had he asked me to go to church, I would have went. Because I was dying for somebody to ask me to church. I remember Greg Laurie used to sit down at the beach, and people would come around sharing the Lord, and they would hand out tracts to everybody but him. He was like so far gone looking, he said, that they just not even Jesus can help you type thing. That's the way he took it. But he would ask them for a tract. He didn't read them, but he thought it was sacrilegious to throw them away. So he put them in his drawer. And then when he did get saved, he went and read them all, and it was sort of his discipleship, reading all those tracts. But I do think that we'd be amazed how many hearts are opened. I mean, Jesus taught his apostles that, didn't he? With the woman at the well. You say 3 months and then the harvest, but open your eyes, look. The fields are white. White means they're getting ready to go bad. You've got seconds to harvest them before they turn and go bad. The fields they've been ready to harvest for quite some time. And now they're at the very end of the time they can be harvested. Get out there like a madman and start harvesting. And then he said, it goes like this. One plants, another waters, another guy gets to harvest. So don't look at it as if I don't pull in the harvest. They don't pray the sinner's prayer. It was a useless thing. No, just always look at it optimistically. I shared a little bit, and I probably planted a seed that wasn't there before, or I watered on a seed from somebody else. Probably you were directed that way because of their grandmother who prayed for them for 30 years, right? But then the one person who does bring in the harvest, it's a great joy, and everybody rejoices together in that harvest. So I think there is a beautiful story and of course, a sermon to be preached out of those beautiful verses. But then we end with rather a funny, unique picture of Moses. In verse 33 to 36, so they departed from the mountain of the Lord on the journey for 3 days, and the ark of the covenant of the Lord went before them for 3 days' journey to search out the resting place for them. So this is interesting. They departed from the mountain of the Lord, Mount Sinai, as we know, journeyed 3 days, it wasn't very far, and the ark of the covenant of the Lord went before them for 3 days' journey and to search out the resting place for them. So it's sort of interesting because when you read this, it sounds like the ark was not back with the Kohathites, but that it was actually a day or 2, 3 journey ahead of everybody else in this picture here. So it's sort of an addition to what we just read when it said the Kohathites were sort of in the middle of the pack. Yeah, but not the ark. The ark was 3 days' journey out there, maybe with Hobab, with that crowd as well. I don't know. And the cloud of the Lord was above them by day when they went out from the camp. So it was whenever the ark set out that Moses would say, in the morning, he would come out and the trumpet blast and the burning, and then he would come out and say, rise up, O Lord, and let your enemies be scattered, and let those who hate you flee before you. And it was cute. It was quaint. We're going to see a couple of pictures of this, where it was like they're telling you this wasn't God speaking, but this was a man with God's heart speaking. And it was just as powerful, even though it originated from him. And we really get the heart of God by listening to Moses being Moses. So Moses, he just believed God. And he could taste the promised land. And he could just taste the victory. And he could just feel the water of Jordan under his feet. And he could see the giants falling. And he's just like, man, we're a day closer. When they got up in the morning, he's like, rise, O Lord, like the Lord's going to wake up. But again, it's okay. This is Moses. Rise up. This is a new day that you've made. Rise up with us, Lord. But what's on his mind? Not the blessings that we saw of the priestly blessings in number 6, but we see him talking about the enemies. Let your enemies be scattered. Let those who hate you flee before you. I feel that way. I felt that way with the protest this last week. It was just evil what they were protesting, hating Israel, demanding Hamas be able to live in the country here, the people that are terrorists that killed 1,200 Israelis in one day, and it was just evil. They were being evil about it. And then, of course, for abortion and for transgendered rights, and you would actually have transgendered for Hamas. It's like, dude, do you realize if you went over there, you would last 2 seconds before they would stone you to death or throw you off a building? Do you understand? There was no logic in this. It's just spiritual darkness. But there's a point where you just feel like Moses, Let your enemies be scattered, Walk out in the middle of the street in New York. Rise up, O Lord, let the enemy be scattered. Let those who hate you, they do. They don't just hate Israel. They hate God. They hate Christians. They hate anybody who has a moral compass of any kind. If you don't agree with their absolute bizarre doctrine of insanity, you are evil to them. And I'll tell you what, they're evil to us. And we want to see their salvation. And there is salvation there. But here he's just saying, let the enemies flee before you. Then in the evening, in verse 36, he would come out and he would say, when it was time to rest, return, O Lord, to the many thousands of Israel. So I don't know where the Lord went during the day, but and I'm not sure how this was translated in Hebrew either, but it's sort of like, be our blanket laying upon the baby at night. Return to us and tuck us into bed and be our guard at night as well as during the day. A beautiful little moment we get to see, and we'll see some more in Numbers, some cute little moments of Moses along the way. What kind of person he was, his personality. And I love it. I love his heart. Love a leader like that. As Deborah said in Judges 4, when the leaders rise up to lead, blessed be the Lord. Well, before we go into a time of prayer, is there any thoughts you